Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Gail Carson. Welcome to Living Regret Free, a program that shows you how to live a better and more joyful life. As an added bonus, I invite you to listen to an introduction to my Mindset Matters program, which ties into this so well. Go to www.sobmindset.com. It's free, and I know you will enjoy it. If you'd like to contact me personally, drop me a line at gailcarson13@gmail.com or go to my website, www.spunkyoldbroad.com, and sign up for my weekly newsletter. Hi, everyone. Our guest today is Debbie Unterman. I call her Deb because I know her, but she is fantastic. She has worked with people with their subconscious mind and help people go within and find their own answers. She also has a wonderful solution for codependency and works with couples a lot too. And currently, she's becoming a certified brain health coach with Dr. Daniel Amen and will be affiliated with the Amen Clinic in Atlanta. Well, Deb, you have a lot on your plate at this point. How are you today?
I am very good. How are you?
Just fine, just fine. Well, you've got a variety of things that you do, and I know you're involved in all of them. So let me start by asking you, how did you get started on this particular journey?
Well, that was a very interesting way because I work with people in their subconscious mind. And I literally got started by a dream. And I'm not talking about a Martin Luther King kind of dream, a real subconscious mind dream that I had when a friend of mine said to me, Debbie, you know that money that I owe you? Well, I invested it for you and you're rich. So it was one of those kind of dreams that you never forget.
And that's kind of a nice thing to have happen when you didn't even know about it.
I know. So I had to investigate. I was away from home at that time. So as soon as I got back, I had to find out what is going on because I sometimes have these real, prognosticative dreams. I was only 30 at the time. I was still young. And I got back to California, and it turns out that she had just come back from a weekend workshop with this man who was teaching something called alchemical hypnotherapy or alchemy. And I had been, this was 1983. And in 75, I had graduated from college with a degree in interpersonal communication. So I hadn't yet found what I wanted to do, but I knew I liked talking to people. I liked communicating. And so I went to see this guy. I had a session from him. I was semi-impressed, but I also went to see him speak. And then I was very impressed because I took a lot of psychology courses. And when I heard him for 1 hour, I said, oh, wow, I'm hearing more truth about the mind from him in an hour than I heard in a 4-year degree about psychology. So I had to, literally what I heard inside my own head, I said to myself, I could teach this stuff. And that's what happened. I started doing more and more sessions and found out why the first one wasn't so good because I was very blocked. I wasn't really in touch with my own emotions. I didn't really know myself so well. I had a lot of stuff living inside of me, and I was just, going on my merry way, not knowing the pain that I was living with. Literally, as a kid, I had stomach aches that were undiagnosed, that they had me in Mass General Hospital for 3 days for tests. And that was after lots of other doctors and before lots of other doctors all the way up.
Yeah, but in those days, she didn't know anything. They didn't know what they know now. And so it was just a whole different time. But you also, I want to ask you about your book because you wrote a book.
Yes.
Tell us the title of it and, what it's all about.
It's called Talking to Myself, Learning to Love the Voices in Your Head. And that's what I discovered through my journeying, that I was, one of the reasons for my stomach aches was because I was hearing my parents tell me who I should be in the 50s and 60s, and it sure didn't match with who I wanted to be, but I wanted to be a good little girl. And so as I complied with their wishes, I hurt myself more and more. I mean, I was doubled over with these stomach aches. And, then when I got into the work, I found that the voice of my judge, my inner judge, was really like the voice of my father telling me what I should be doing. And it didn't mesh with what I wanted to do. So I help other people find these voices that live in your heads. And we have lots of them.
When you talk about those things, Debbie, I have to tell you that I've often said, people say, who was my mentor and who do I model myself after? And I always say my mother, because my mother was very strong and very disciplining with us, but yet allowed both my sister and I to be our own free spirit. And I was a really free spirit and really almost like the black sheep of the family, because my sister was so good and so perfect.
Uh-huh.
On the other hand, they really gave me a lot of freedom. So I was very fortunate that I never went through any of those kinds of things. But you always say that it goes back to childhood. And so I think it's important for our listeners who are parents and who are, many who are bringing up young children, to talk about how they should speak to their kids and not put them in that kind of a position that you were put in. What do you suggest to people like that?
Well, you're giving me the positive of how they should speak. And what I find when I go through people's heads, is that their parents did not speak the way they should speak, and they didn't do what they should do. I mean, you would not believe how many bad mommies and daddies there are out there, and how much pain I have heard that children have suffered at the hands of their parents. It's not really talked about, but I have been hearing stories for almost 35 years now that, you don't even think of. You wouldn't even believe the things that I've heard. So good mommies and daddies are probably talking the right way. We know that from studies that for every negative message a person gets, like even in relationships, that they need to have 5 positive ones to offset the one negative. Because in brain research, what they say is that negative things that are said to you stick like Velcro, and positives fall off like Teflon. So
well, I agree with you there. I mean, that is absolutely the truth. They always say you need at least 5 positive emotional deposits in your bank account for the one negative withdrawal that you have,
Yeah.
But what do you suggest to parents like that? I mean, you must have some advice for people. What are some of the things that you tell them?
It happens right from, I would say from birth, but actually they have discovered that it happens before birth, that in the last trimester, that there are actually the words and the worries that a mother is having while the baby's in the womb can translate to shortening the what's called the telomeres, the ends of the chromosomes that are causing a lot of the sickness and old age. That starting from the first trimester, the last trimester, and then those first 7 years of life, you need to really let that child be the center of attention and feed them what they want to. We have to obviously stop them from hurting themselves, but we can't stop them in a way that makes them feel bad. You want me to tell you one story of something that seems innocent that a parent did, but really had a detrimental effect for the rest of this client's life? Would you like to hear a story?
If it's not too long, because I want to get to some other things that you do.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Sure. Yeah.
This is a short one. This was in the old country, one of those Slavias or something, where a person was being brought up and they had the kind of irons that they had to heat up on the stove. Well, as a good little girl, she wants to do the same things she sees her mother and her grandmother who lives in the same house with them do. So she wanted to iron. So she crawled up on the stove to get the iron to play ironing. And of course, it burned her. And so what happens? She gets scolded, and they're scared, of course, but they're making her be bad. And that affected her for the rest of her life, that she was bad because the iron fell on her. So I help people to realize that, wait a minute, this was really the parents' fault. With a 2-year-old in the house, they shouldn't even have an iron where the baby can touch it. And we had to turn that around so that she knew it wasn't that she was bad. It was that something bad happened, and parents could have been a little more thoughtful. That's the short story.
Well, it's interesting because there's a very thin line between loving your child and giving them freedom and then discipline. I mean, it's very difficult to see how how you discipline without hurting the child. For example, when my older son was in first grade, now today they'd be arrested for this. When he was in first grade, they literally thumbtacked him to the chair. They took his face and they thumbtacked him. But when the teacher told me, I understood because he was a hyper kid, and I didn't really see anything wrong with it. And he was a hyper kid all of his life, and that was. But it also, he was a very free spirit, and so I think it depends on the child themselves. So there's a lot to do with that. So again, you talk about what happened with the iron, and of course there's guilt in there. So why do you think that guilt is such a damaging emotion?
Well, guilt and shame are different. So we have to differentiate them. Guilt is over something that we did, like say we threw a rock and it put some of his eyes out, or broke a window or something. Then we can feel guilty about that. But shame is what's piled on us. And shame is about our very being. It's not I did something bad, but it's that I am bad in my very soul. And that's what we have to watch, because no one is bad. Just like, are we going to say the teacher was bad? The methods of schooling are bad because children need to run around, they need to get out that energy. So sometimes you have to look for a system error. There's something wrong with this everywhere here. You can't thumbtack a kid, a 6-year-old to a chair to tell him not to run around when that's what 6-year-olds do. They run around.
I know. But I could just at that time, I could just see, I could see him creating this commotion in class, but I can also see where shame could turn into guilt, because if you're shamed enough, you do start to feel guilty about something. But
yes,
so how do we stop? How do we stop these thoughts that make us feel wrong and bad?
There's a saying that guilt seeks punishment. And when you think about it, the more guilty that we are about something that wasn't even something to, it could have been something that we were shamed about, that we really shouldn't even feel guilty. But the feeling of being guilty creates a need for being punished. So bad things keep happening. We have car accidents. We burn ourselves. We get tickets for speeding, whatever, because there's something that we're not doing on purpose. It's very subconscious. But as long as we hold this guilt, we're going to want somebody to, let's say, spank us, to punish us. And so bad things keep happening. So that's why it's so important to let go of this guilt and shame and realize that, things happen, but we can be lovable just as we are.
You also make a differentiation between talk therapy and hypnotherapy. So what's the difference?
Well, one of the big differences is the way the brain works, and the fact that these things like her burning herself from the iron, that she's not going to get to it's just not going to come up that she's going to be talking and she's going to be saying, oh, well, when I was